This is looking at Last Lesson of the Afternoon by D.H. Lawrence. And if you're looking for this poem online, there are a couple of different versions of it. I'm using the last version of it, which is 2 stanzas. So if you just flick through here, that's the version that we're talking about today. You will find kind of longer ones. They were generally, I think, revised by him down into this version. And this was then the kind of more definitive one. What we're going to do is just look at the poem generally. I'm going to assume that you've read it, and we'll annotate it through looking really at practicing close reading and ideas there. So as ever, when we first come to a poem, looking at the title, the expectations created by the title, so we can think, okay, what are the connotations, what are the ideas we get straight away, and then by the end of the poem we can revisit those and then say, right, what did it conform to? What did it subvert? So if you're subverting something, you're challenging it, you're kind of turning it round. So last lesson of the afternoon, we know really we're going to be in a kind of school environment. And the expectation, I guess, is that really traditionally it might be a student, right? And if you know this poem, you'll know that that straight away is an idea we're going to play with. And last lesson of the afternoon, we can maybe pick up, there is alliteration there. We're only ever going to comment on alliteration if we've got something sensible to say about the effect of it, because otherwise it's very easy to spot a repeated letter. It's less easy to be convincing about something that it means. So here, because we're looking at that kind of last lesson, I might go for the alliteration of that L, creating that kind of liquid rolling sound, and maybe kind of, the kind of laziness or the lull, the kind of sense of maybe a little bit of apathy we've got. If you are apathetic, you are kind of tending towards being passive, tending towards being inactive, inertia, generally just kind of feeling meh, right? Don't ever write feeling meh in an essay. I've got last lesson of the afternoon. Again, all the connotations of afternoon, the end of the day, the idea that things are coming to a close. Maybe we can kind of say something about that long, drawn out O sound on the afternoon. But generally, I'm getting the impression here that things are going to be ending, things are coming to a close. So then if we read the poem, and I'm not going to kind of read it out loud as part of this video, but if you read it, you can then work out exactly what's going on, because the next thing to do is to work out the story of the poem. And unless you get the story, and unless you get the sense of progression, where do we start, where do we end, you're going to have some difficulty formulating your hypothesis, formulating your theory, if you're doing a more extended answer on a poem. So straight away, we get the idea of the bell ringing and ending the tiredness, that the teacher, and we realize this is the voice of a teacher, starts comparing his students to a pack of dogs, hunting dogs, but he says he cannot start them chasing knowledge that they don't want to hunt. And he is tired of hauling them and urging them. And he says he doesn't want to kind of take the force of the books that are on the desk. He has 60 books, okay, full 3 score is down here. And each of those 60 books contains several insults, so kind of numerous and varied insults. The scrawl of slovenly work, so it's messy, it's kind of, this is the poor effort they've offered me. And this, I'm sick and tired more than any thrall upon woodstacks working weariedly. This work is more exhausting than any physical work, he says, when we'll look at this in more detail. So this teacher really doesn't want to do any more work. He's tired of the students' bad attitudes as manifested in the work they're handing in, and he says he's exhausted. And then in the second stanza, he questions how he should react. How is he going to react? And here his extended metaphor of burning and fire is talking about his energy and his kind of energy reserves, and how is he going to spend them? Is he going to burn them up on these students, or is he going to keep that kind of heat for himself? And he comes to the conclusion that actually if he If he expends all of his energy on these students who don't care, then he will start to hate them. So I will sit and wait for the bell. So if we look at the story, we've got a teacher who is impatient for the day to end, is frustrated by the behavior and attitude of his students as manifested, so as made physical, manifested by the work they're handing in, and the idea of having to deal with that and to keep them on track and to motivate them is exhausting him. In the second stanza, he queries what his course of action should be, what he wants to do, how he's going to cope, and he comes to the conclusion that actually he's doing nobody any favors if he burns himself out on their behalf. So instead, he will wait, right? So we start with the question, when will the bell ring? And we end with the resolution of, I will sit and wait for the bell. So your hypothesis, if you're making a kind of reaction, a kind of forming a more extended response to this, will be something along the lines of Lawrence uses the first person persona of an exhausted teacher to explore his reactions to his students and by extension to the system of education in general and the effect it's having upon him. Okay, then you'd maybe kind of do a very quick précis, a very quick summary in terms of going through the poem. And I mean quick, I don't mean kind of paraphrase the whole thing. If we then look at the different methods and the different kind of bits of close reading, right? So we have our first line, and we're going to pick up this idea of the question. And as ever, you know, we've got questions, uncertainty, which doesn't quite fit with maybe our more archetypal, and archetype is the best version of something, more archetypal version of a teacher. You know, when you're uncertain, usually it's the students who don't know the things. It should always be the teachers, really. But, you know, if we take the stereotypical teacher, you know, they're not asking this type of question. It's also playing with expectations because normally it's the students wanting the lessons to end. We get the idea of end this weariness. So he's not using, you know, this lesson, this afternoon, this education. He has labeled all of kind of his job, his kind of purpose as this weariness. It is all tiredness and fatigue, right? And when will the bell ring? Obviously, bells are indicative of the structure of the school day and of that heavily kind of formalized nature of education. So, you know, this idea that he's still working within this framework of the rules, the bell becomes a symbol for everything that's constraining him and, in fact, by extension, the students. And we get another example here, another kind of metaphor at this point, when we move on to the idea of the students as hounds. If we have them as dogs, they cannot be ruled, okay? Unruly, ungovernable. And he says, again, you know, how long have they tugged the leash? And the leash here, the lead, think of all those images of restraint and kind of limitation. It should be that education is kind of setting them free, but actually they're pulling on it as this kind of thing that's restricting them. They've strained apart. There's no idea of any sort of unity in this classroom. They're all kind of acting against each other, right? Normally hunting dogs would be kind of part of the hunt and acting together, but actually these ungovernable dogs can't work with their masters in this metaphor. He refers to this they, and a lot of the time this kind of repeated pronoun and the anonymous nature of that pronoun kind of says he doesn't view these students as individuals. He views them collectively as a group. It's just the students, you know, this group who are doing this. They're not seen one by one anymore. We have the kind of almost the onomatopoeia of tugged in there. And there's some kind of slight sense of possession or responsibility at the start of that metaphor when he calls them my pack. Maybe a little bit of resentment is coming through on the grounds that I cannot start them again on a quarry of knowledge. They might be his hounds, but he lacks control, right? And that I cannot start them again is interesting, because the enjambment here, the line break here, kind of gives a double meaning to it. We know because of the enjambed line that it's I cannot start them again on a quarry of knowledge they hate to hunt. So, I can't get them going again in something they don't want to do. But also the line break means that the teacher himself says, I cannot start. There is that reluctance, there is that drag on the idea that he can't get anything going, right? I cannot start them again on a quarry of knowledge they hate to hunt. A quarry is the thing that you're chasing. So he's extending this metaphor into, these dogs, I can't start them chasing something that they don't want to chase. In fact, it's more than they don't want to, they're actively averse to it. They hate to hunt it. I would maybe pick up on the aspirants there, the aspirant alliteration, that kind of aversion, maybe, the idea that they really don't want anything to do with it, coming from that sound. And I can haul them and urge them no more. So he feels that he is managing them physically and psychologically. He has been trying to control them and he can't do it. And to emphasize that idea of, he's at the end of his tether with it, we have, no more, no more. And rhyming there, no more, endure and score. The repetition of no more is emphasizing his kind of growing resolution or his growing resignation. And I mean resignation not as in quitting a job, I mean resignation as in saying that's me, I'm done, with becoming resigned to something. That repetition is really, it's repeating the negative. He's really kind of finished with this, he's had enough. The end rhyme and then the internal rhyme here is kind of emphasizing, it's really emphatic, the idea that he cannot do this. It's marking it out, as is this plosive alliteration here. I can't endure to bear the brunt of the books that lie out on the desk. These actually, the passive books, the books are lying there almost personified, just waiting for him. But actually they're putting this pressure on him, the whole idea of that force coming out through the plosive alliteration there, that he's feeling really genuinely oppressed or under pressure from this. So he can't bear the brunt of the books that lie out on the desks. And then that caesura, that pause as he reflects exactly what's in these books, these 60 exercise books, the several insults of blotted pages and the scrawl of slovenly work that they have offered me. So he's got this kind of repetition of there. He's trying to define exactly what's going on here from that listing, if you like. This is what I'm suffering. This is what is piling up from that repetition. That he doesn't even kind of really view it as anything other than an insult, that they are blotted and scrawled. This is the language of laziness and apathy and kind of really not caring from these students. And the idea that they have offered makes it seem derisory. Okay, if you are derisory, you're kind of adopting the idea of, well, whatever, take it, leave it. Okay, so it's not kind of, there's no enthusiasm from these students. They're just kind of throwing it his way. And then we get this monosyllabic declaration, I am sick, right? Caesura, I'm tired. This kind of sums up itself. I've had enough. And again, it's that physical and psychological drain upon him. And thrall is service or servitude. So he's saying, this is tiring him more than any service, more than any physical work, stacking wood, working wearily. And, we can get that sense of sighing from that repeated, alliterated W there. He really can't be any more exhausted if he was physically doing everything he could. So if we then look at this, the form and structure things that are beginning to build up here, we can see that we've got some full end rhymes. We've got hunt and brunt there, more score, scrawl, thrall. To look there, oh, we've got another. Is there a more? Yes, more and score. And me and weariedly. I'd say he is connected to the tiredness through that rhyme. There is a kind of, almost like a kind of plodding sense of it going on, this connection, this sort of predictability that this is the day, this is the pace the day is going at. Almost kind of, he's being led through this reflection by the fact that it's exhausting him, completely tiring him out. It's all implying that it's absolutely interminable. We then kind of start our second stanza, and shall I take, so starting with that conjunction is this kind of thought and reflection, right? We're moving to a slight kind of change, that kind of slight volta in terms of the change of subject. Well, what shall I do about it? And he starts his second extended metaphor. Well, if he takes this fuel, and I can start to kind of pick out the words that are starting to deal with fires. Okay. I don't know if I've missed any there, but he's certainly using the idea of his energy being consumed, being burned up, that he has a really finite, a really limited energy level, and it's being used up by these students, and it's exhausting him spiritually. He has only got this precious amount of energy for his soul. And he says, shall I kind of use this until I can, to rouse something is to awaken, to enliven, to awaken what I want to do, like a fire to consume their dross of indifference. Dross is rubbish. Can I get my energy levels so I can actually absorb all of this not botheredness, right? And start to burn the scroll, this kind of written never-ending list of insults in punishment. What am I going to do? Am I going to get enough energy to be bothered to actually punish them for this? And then we have that question, can I do this? And then again, monosyllabic exclamation, that exclamation mark acting as an end stop. I will not. And then he takes his extended metaphor and it kind of extends it even further. And it's interesting if we look at the modal verbs that start to kick in here. And a modal verb, if you think of verbs of obligation, possibility, conditionality, we've got I will not do this. Shall, okay, I will, shall. There's a new sense of resolution there as he takes his own kind of interests back. I will not waste myself to embers full. I won't burn myself out. And it's interesting that he starts to view anything he can do with these boys as a waste. This isn't your romanticized teacher saying, I will give everything I've got and save these students. He's like, no, not at the cost of me, right? We think embers are those kind of, burnt out bits of fire at the end. And again, this repetition of them, not for them. Okay, so he's moving away from the anonymous them, this collective drain on his energy, to this emphatic I all the time, myself. I will do this, I will do this. Okay. And then we kind of get this resolution driving to the end. I will keep some of my strength for myself, for if I should sell it all. So again, as a view of education, that is not really that traditional level. You know, if I sell it for them, it implies that there's almost that kind of commercial deal. He's not in this any longer for the love of teaching. He's in it kind of as a transaction. He's having to weigh up what it's going to cost him. And again, more repetition of them and that balance. You know, if I give it all to them, I will hate them. And so we come to that idea of they hate the hunt of knowledge. He doesn't want to tip into hating the students. And therefore, all he can do is resolve to sit and wait for the bell. So our poem kind of, you know, goes from when will the bell ring? Well, the answer is it doesn't matter how long, I will wait for the bell because that's all I can do. So again, if you look, same sort of deal here. We've got this set of rhymes in here that are talking about, you know, things like we've got keep, sleep going together, you know, and think about the connection between those two words. You know, he needs to kind of preserve everything. Sell, bell, you know, linking that idea of commerciality with the school structure, maybe. Them rhymes with them, you know, they are coming back. It keeps coming back to these students. They should be the center of everything, and that it is, but not in a good way. And then we get this kind of end stop, and then this punctuation here, this caesura at the start. It's kind of double pause to do that resolution. He doesn't want to hate them. And so this is all he can now do. I would be looking maybe at some of the enjambment here, kind of speeding it up as he considers, you know, what do I do? What do I do? Then ending in that end stop, the exclamation mark. I will not, that feeling of resolution. If you look really at the kind of movement through it, it's that kind of move from uncertainty to certainty. It's a criticism of the education system, and maybe implicitly saying, you know, look, this teacher feels like he's on his own against this kind of collective group of students, and he only has himself and his own resources. So despite the kind of framework of the bell being in place, really, there's nothing else, and the students and the teacher are not coming off particularly well in this poem in terms of what is education. I hope that gives you some stuff to think about. Enjoy.